Hi, I'm Blair Ferdilius from the Daily Osmopolitan website. I also run the Oz Index website. And today I'm going to read a story from Oziana, 1989, entitled Follow the Other Brick Road, written by Frederick E. Otto. When Dorothy's house landed in the Munchkin country of Oz, the Good Witch of the North told her to follow the yellow brick road and ask for the help of the wizard in returning to Kansas. Those of you who have seen the movie of that story probably remember that the yellow brick road was sort of blended in with a red brick road at the point where they both began. Following the witch's directions, Dorothy and Toto started out for the Emerald City on the yellow part of the road, and if they had stayed on it, they would shortly have met all those familiar people we have read about and loved for many years. Well, Dorothy's journey home began as it was supposed to, but there was an interruption which you may not have heard about, and so I'll tell you that story. Now in Kansas, there are cornfields and scarecrows to frighten off the crows that come and eat the corn. These are just stuffed figures that are there to fool the birds, but they're not alive and they certainly don't talk. So when Dorothy's travels brought her to the field where the scarecrow was, she was nearly frightened out of her wits when he spoke to her. Toto, too. In fear, they fled back to the place where the yellow brick road began, in order to seek protection and new instructions. But the good witch had already flown off in her bubble, and only a couple of lullaby leaguers were still hanging around. Dorothy told them about the talking scarecrow and asked for their advice. They suggested that she follow the other brick road, since Oz was filled with magic and sorcery, and no matter where she went, she was likely to come across someone who could help. All she had to do was ask where to find the wizard. That seemed simple and logical, so Dorothy and Toto began a new journey along the other brick road. This one led northward through pleasant, well-cultivated land which presented no apparent threats or dangers. When the road reached the tranquil Munchkin River, it passed over a graceful arched bridge. Everything seemed quite peaceful and civilized. That is, it seemed so until Dorothy felt the ground tremble and heard the rumble of some large creature thundering across a meadow. Ahead, she could see something approaching at great speed and looming ever larger as it drew nearer. Toto dashed about excitedly and barked and growled in his determination to protect his mistress. When the author of all the commotion was about a block away, Dorothy recognized it as a gigantic rhinoceros. It slowed as it approached her and came to a trembling halt right in front of the terrified girl. But Dorothy's fear shortly changed to pity as she saw that the great beast was racked with sobs and that profuse tears flowed from her tiny eyes. A large lavender bow decorated the single long horn that protruded from the animal's nose.
Have you seen my mother?
She asked in a quavering voice. Your mother? Returned Dorothy. Do you mean there's another rhino around here that is bigger than you?
We don't say rhino,
Said the beast more calmly and a bit stiffly.
we say rhinoceros. More dignified, you know. But you needn't be frightened,
She continued more mildly.
Mama and I are the same size, only she's older, of course.
Of course, replied Dorothy. No, I haven't seen any other rhinoceroses around. How did you happen to lose her? And how is it you can talk? Toto, hush! Dorothy's dog had been barking and making little dashes at the rhinoceros's legs. Now he quieted down and approached as near as he dared to sniff inquisitively.
We were out grazing. I'm big enough to graze now. I'm 3,
Said the young animal proudly.
I guess I got so involved with some nice tender twigs that I didn't notice when she wandered away. And now I can't find her, and I don't know how to get home.
The tears again filled the little eyes. Well, I'm lost too, explained Dorothy. But the Munchkins told me to follow this brick road, and when I find the wizard, I'll ask him to send me back to Kansas. Maybe he could send you home too, but you didn't tell me how you happened to be able to talk.
Oh, everybody can talk in Oz,
replied the rhinoceros casually.
Do you really think the wizard would send me home too? That'd be wonderful. But, by the way, my name is Reba. What's yours?
I'm Dorothy Gale, and my dog's name is Toto, said the girl. And I think it would be nice to have you as a traveling companion. We can all start out again as soon as I've rested a bit. I've been walking all morning and I'm pretty tired.
Would you like to ride on my back?
Asked Reba.
I can go for hours and hours without resting, and the faster we can get to the wizard, the sooner he can send us home. I can carry the dog too, if you're sure he won't bite me.
Oh, that would be wonderful, exclaimed Dorothy. Come on, Toto, we get to ride now. Toto was less enthusiastic than Dorothy about proceeding on rhinoceros back, but Dorothy patted and reassured him, and at last he allowed her to hold him on her lap as she settled into place on Reba's wide back. Her hide formed plates that looked rather like armor. Dorothy was able to grasp the edges of these and hold on. When Reba's speed got up to about 30 miles an hour, Dorothy was most grateful to have something to hold on to. After a couple of hours of thundering across the blue meadows of the Munchkin country, Dorothy began to be aware that the landscape had developed a purple hue. When Reba slowed down a bit as she followed the road up a little hill, Dorothy asked about the colors.
Oh, we've come to the Gillikin country, explained the rhinoceros. Everything here in the northern part of Oz is purple. See that man at the top of the hill? All his clothes are purple.
Let's ask him about the wizard, suggested Dorothy. We're not sure this road will take us to the right place. So Reba slowed down and stopped beside the Gillikin man, who stared at her in wonder rather than fear. Excuse me, sir, said Dorothy. Can you tell me where we can find the wizard? Reba, trying to be helpful, offered,
He probably lives in a big palace.
You must be looking for Wham, said the man. There's a really wonderful palace up north of here. He may live there. Nobody ever gets to see Wham, but he makes a lot of magical stuff and seems to be helpful and kind. This road will take you right to the palace. It's made out of rubies. My Aunt Em has a ring with a little ruby in it, said Dorothy. She said it was a family treasure. So the whole palace made out of rubies must be worth a fortune.
Funny to have red stones in a purple country, though,
remarked Reba.
But then, of course, the road is red. Well, let's run on and see if Wham will help us. Thanks for the help.
The Gillikin man tipped his hat, and the travelers proceeded northward. Reba traveled at her usual breakneck speed until Dorothy begged her to slow down a bit because she was becoming exhausted with holding herself on the rhinoceros's back and keeping Toto from slipping off her lap. Besides, she added, it must be supper time, and I'm getting hungry. Oh, look, there's a picnic table beside the road. Let's stop there. So Reba left the red brick road and stopped beside the table, which appeared to have nothing on it but a lavender tablecloth. But as soon as Dorothy sat on one of the attached benches and began to open the basket of food she had brought on the trip, items of food and drink began magically to appear. There was a bowl of salad, a little pot of steaming stew, a glass of milk, and a plate of fresh fruit. My, exclaimed Dorothy, this isn't a bit like picnic tables in Kansas. There you have to bring your own food. Just then, a little breeze blew up one corner of the tablecloth, exposing a bronze plaque. Dorothy read, Wayside Picnic Table, installed by the wizard Wham, 1121 OZ. Oh, we must be in Wham's country, 'cause he put this table here. Would you like some of this food, Reba?
Well, I might try that apple,
replied the rhinoceros.
But then I think I'll just nibble on some leaves while you eat your meal.
Dorothy dropped the apple into Reba's mouth, then turned to her food. There was plenty of everything, and Toto was able to make a good meal of the leftover stew. As soon as Dorothy had swallowed the last grape, all the dishes vanished, leaving the table just as they had found it. Reba returned from her browsing, and the three travelers resumed their journey along the other brick road. It took them past a pretty lake, in the middle of which was a little island. In the center of the island was a pot from which grew a large plant with flowers that changed variety even as they gazed at it. One moment it was covered with roses, and the next there was a profusion of tiger lilies, which were followed in turn by morning glories, daisies, peonies, and apparently never-ending variety of blossoms. Dorothy would have enjoyed looking at the ever-changing plant for hours, but she had to agree with Reba that it was important for them to press on in their search for the wizard and assistance in returning home. Knowing that Dorothy was uncomfortable when they were traveling as swiftly as they had at the start, Reba slowed her pace to a brisk walk and was able to converse with the girl as they proceeded. Dorothy told her about Kansas and A&M and Uncle Henry and of her rather uneventful life on the farm. And Reba described life with her mother and the other animals who inhabited the great forest of Gugu somewhere in the purple Gillikin country. Then as day passed into evening, they decided to stop and sleep for the night. Dorothy had no fear of danger with the mighty rhinoceros there to protect her, and she settled down on the soft grass under a spreading oak tree and slept peacefully until dawn, with Toto curled up beside her and Reba dozing quietly nearby. Next morning, Dorothy made a breakfast of some bread she had brought along in her basket and a couple of plums she had saved from the supper furnished by Wam. Toto ate some bread. Reba ate some leaves, and they all quenched their thirst with clear, cold water from a little stream near the road. Then, with the morning sun still low in the eastern sky, Dorothy and Toto climbed aboard their mighty mount and they continued their route northward. After a few hours, they became aware of a rosy brightness ahead of them. At last, from the top of a little rise, they were able to look across a lovely valley to a glistening palace on the slope of the hill on the other side. It was built of great blocks of ruby, and Dorothy knew she'd never seen so splendid a structure in her life. The red brick road extended down the hill on which they stood, crossed the valley, and ended at the gleaming gates of the Ruby Palace. There seemed to be a few houses and cottages along the road which they would pass on their way. With a snort of satisfaction, Reba started purposefully down the road, gathering speed as she neared the valley floor. Purple-clad natives gaped at the passing rhinoceros and her passengers as she streaked past them. Her momentum decreased as they passed along the flat part of the valley and began the ascent on the other side. Suddenly, Dorothy cried out, and Reba stopped. "Wam!" it said. "Wam, on the gate at the last cottage we passed," the girl insisted. Reba retraced her steps to the modest dwelling, and sure enough, a sign on the wicker gate stated, "Wam, Wizard." A bell pull hung beside the gate, and Dorothy was about to pull it when some Gillikin children in purple and lavender costumes cautioned her not to. "But we've come all this way to see him and get help," explained Dorothy. "Nobody sees Wam," said one of the girls. "We've lived here for years and years, and we've never seen him." "Well, doesn't he ever go to work in the yard or go shopping or anything?" asked Dorothy. "He can't just stay in the house all the time." "He doesn't have to go shopping," replied a boy who looked about Dorothy's age. "He has a tree in the yard that supplies all the food he needs. The only way we know he's there is when he plants something, like the traveler's tree, or builds something like the picnic table. I guess he does things at night when nobody's looking." "But we've just got to see him," Dorothy protested. "Reba and Toto and I are all lost, and we need a wizard to send us home." "Maybe Teddypoo could help," suggested one of the little girls.
"Who's that?"
asked Reba. "She's the Good Witch of the North," the girl answered. "Oh, no," said Dorothy. "I've already seen her, and she said I should see the wizard. So you see, I have to see Wam. What could happen if I ring the bell?" "He'd come out, and we'd all have to look at him," cried the children, and off they all ran in terror. "Well, that's just dumb," declared Dorothy. "Maybe he'd even like to have some company." With that, she tugged vigorously at the bell pull, and then a perfectly astonishing thing happened. The air was filled with the clamor of 100 brassy bells, and the simple wicker gate began to change shape right in front of them. The supporting poles grew into tall marble pillars. The gate itself became a portal of glittering gold of elaborate and fantastic design. The humble cottage began to grow and expand to become a palace of lustrous alabaster with appointments and decorations of gold and precious jewels. The golden gate swung open invitingly to admit Dorothy and her companions. They entered joyfully, but cautiously, looking about eagerly for a glimpse of the owner of this luxurious palace.
"This must be the most beautiful house in the world,"
Sighed Reba rapturously. Yes, added Dorothy, except for that ruby palace on the hillside ahead.
"What?"
Roared a voice ahead of them. Suddenly, they were back in the yard of the little cottage they had seen in the first place. The beautiful gate had once again become wicker, and the grand palace shrank down to become the simple thatched hut it had been a few minutes before. But they had indeed entered the yard, and now looked apprehensively as the cottage door was thrown open, and an enraged little man in a shabby bathrobe hobbled out to confront them. So, he snarled, you think Galette's castle is more beautiful than mine, do you? Well, I'll have you know that anybody can dig up a bunch of rubies, but it takes an artist to create a dwelling of alabaster and gold. And if you can't appreciate my palace any more than the purple clods that live around here do, then you don't get to see anything better than they see. So there! With that, the little man stomped his slippered foot, tossed his tousled hair, folded his arms, and thrust out his considerable chin. Dorothy was shocked by all this, but managed to collect herself and attempt amends. I'm terribly sorry if I hurt your feelings, she said sincerely. Of course, we really haven't had a chance to look at the Ruby Palace very carefully, so it was wrong of me to say it was better when I'm not really sure. But I think your cottage is one of the prettiest ones in the valley, and I hope you'll forgive us and let us visit you. The wizard, for of course it was Wam himself, who faced them, was moved by Dorothy's sincerity and charm. Being complimented for his hut was unexpected after what he had considered an insult to his castle. This was no ordinary thoughtless child before him, and Wam decided to learn more about her before summarily dismissing her. Well, he began, mollified, I guess you might stay for a cup of tea. The rhinoceros would never fit in the cottage, so I'll serve the tea out here in the yard. Reaching up into the branches of the tree beside the house, Wam plucked 2 cups in saucers and placed them on a little table that stood nearby. He then brought down a silver teapot and poured a quantity of steaming tea into each cup. Lemon or milk? He asked, again reaching up among the branches. Seeing Dorothy was speechless at his demonstration of magic, he got both, and then added, and perhaps a meaty bone for the dog. Toto was delighted. As for your other friend, Wam went on, indicating Reba, perhaps she can find something to her liking among the lower branches along the side of the cottage. Moving to the area he indicated, Reba found a varied feast of leaves and tender twigs that suited her perfectly. That tea is delicious, thank you, said Dorothy. Then, trying to make polite conversation, she went on. You say that Ruby Palace belonged to someone named Galette? Who's she? Oh, she's the local sorceress, replied Wam. She used to be very active in magical matters, but then she married a handsome young man, and now she devotes all of her time to him. But now, said the wizard directly and to the point, tell me, why have you come and had the courage to summon me despite the warnings of the children? We're all lost, admitted Dorothy, taking another sip of tea, with lemon. Toto and I were blown to Oz by a cyclone, and we want more than anything to get back home to Kansas, and Reba somehow got separated from her mother and needs to be directed back to the forest of Gugu. The Good Witch of the North told me a wizard would help me, and you're the best wizard around here, so will you please? The girl's pitiful earnestness touched Wam's heart, but now it was his turn to apologize. I'm afraid you have sought out the wrong wizard, he told her. I'm sure Taddy Pooh meant for you to seek help from someone else now, didn't she? Well, she said I should take the Yellow Brick Road and see the Wizard of Oz. But this is all Oz, isn't it? And you are a wizard, aren't you? Asked Dorothy with something approaching desperation. What you say is true, my dear, said Wam. But just as there are specialists in farming or carpentry or education, there are specialists in magic. Some are good at some things. He waved his hand at the bountiful tree and the transforming cottages. And others do other things best. The Wizard of Oz is more likely than I to be able to get you back to Kansas. Oh, dear, sighed Dorothy, and we've come such a long way in the wrong direction. And poor Reba would have to start all over if she takes me back to the Munchkin country. What shall I do? Wam rested his great chin on his hand and gave the matter his best attention. After a short time, he leaped up and exclaimed, "I have it! I'll call Taddypoo to send you back to the beginning of the Yellow Brick Road." "But what about Reba?" asked the girl. "Oh, no problem," the wizard assured her. "The Forest of Gugu is due west of here, and going at her best speed, she should be able to get there easily by supper time tomorrow. Now, if you're ready, I'll ask the Good Witch of the North to return you to where you landed in Oz." So saying, the wizard drew a little white china bell from a pocket in his robe and rang it gently. "Here she comes now," he said, pointing toward the west. There, just as had occurred when Dorothy first landed in Oz, appeared a glowing bubble. It grew in size as it neared the wizard's cottage, and when it touched the ground, there was the lovely white-clad Good Witch. "Nice to see you, Wam," she said pleasantly. And then, "Why, Dorothy, what in the world are you doing way up here? Didn't I tell you to go to the Emerald City?" "Well, yes," admitted Dorothy, "but we ran into a scarecrow that talked and moved around like a live person, and Toto and I were so frightened we ran back to where we met you, but you'd already left." "That scarecrow is alive," said Taddypoo. "You're supposed to help him and some others you'll meet along the Yellow Brick Road, and everything will work out just fine. Trust me." "I'm afraid I'll lose a lot of time going all the way back to where I started," said Dorothy sadly. "But I guess there's no help for it. Come on, Toto." "Oh, no, dear," said the witch. "I'll send you back in no time, and you won't lose any more time than you already have. And don't trouble your head about Reba. I caught a glimpse of her mother while I was on my way here to Wam's house. All she has to do is trot westward for an hour or two, and she'll be back where she belongs. Are you ready to go back to the Yellow Brick Road now?" "Oh, yes, and thank you ever so much for all your help. And thank you, Mr. Wam, for the tea and everything. Here, Toto." Dorothy gathered the little dog into her arms and waited expectantly. Just then, Reba galloped around the corner to the girl's side. "Oh, Reba," cried Dorothy, "I nearly left without saying goodbye. Thank you with all my heart for your help, but I want to go home to Aunt Em and Uncle Henry. But I'm really going to miss you, and I'll never forget you."
"And you've been a wonderful friend to me," said the rhinoceros with tears in her eyes. "Good luck, and take care. I love you."
With that, the great beast burst into tears and turned away. So as not to prolong this emotional parting, Taddypoo touched Dorothy with her wand, whereupon a lovely transparent bubble formed about her and Toto. It lifted off and drifted southward as Dorothy waved farewell to the witch and the wizard, and they waved in return. Reba was still weeping uncontrollably. Shortly, Dorothy found herself back on the Yellow Brick Road. Setting Toto on the ground, she started off westward toward the Emerald City. In time, she went around a bend and saw a cornfield. There she saw a scarecrow, placed high on a pole to keep the birds from the ripe corn. And the rest of the story, my dears, is the one you saw in that lovely movie. The end.